Close your eyes for a moment. Take a breath, not just through your nose, but through your being. And now listen, not to me, but to the part of you that never speaks, yet always knows. There was a time when I thought I needed many hands to lift me, many voices to guide me, many eyes to witness me. But life has a different grace. It strips you of all that you cling to, not to punish you, but to show you were never incomplete. Yes, I walked the path alone. Not because I wanted to prove anything, but because there was no one who could walk it for me. Friends, family, lovers, they may walk beside you for a while, but when life truly begins to mold you, it does so in the fire of solitude, when no one claps for you, when no one even sees your tears. That is when something magnificent happens. Your spine straightens not because someone told you to sit up, but because dignity becomes your nature. Aloneness is not loneliness, loneliness is craving company. Aloneness is realizing you are complete as you are. There is an intelligent silence that no conversation can teach. There is a power in walking alone that no crowd can offer. Yes, there were nights I cried without a shoulder. There were days I fell without a hand to hold. But in those moments, I met the only one who never left me, myself. And once you meet yourself truly, once you drink from your own source, you no longer thirst for outside approval. Now, when people say you did it alone, I simply smile because I know I was never alone. Oh, I was with something deeper, something truer, something that doesn't shout or boast, something that just is. So if you're walking alone today, don't despair. The path may seem narrow, the world may seem blind to your journey, but listen carefully. In that silence, you will hear it too, the quiet roar of your own becoming. And that, my friend, is more than enough. There is something profound about the moment when you realize that your footsteps echo only your own rhythm. There's no one around to distract you with their interpretations of who you should be. When the silence that once frightened you becomes a familiar companion that no longer demands your attention, but instead invites you to sit with it, to listen deeply, not with your ears, but with that inner dimension of you, which does not have a name or a shape but exists as pure awareness. And in that quiet unfolding, you begin to notice that what you once called solitude is not emptiness, but a space so sacred, so untouched by the noise of opinions and judgments, that even your own thoughts start to bow down before it. This journey is not one you take with maps or instructions, for no one can point to the path that unfolds within your being. No one can show you the terrain of your own consciousness except the silent longing that grows within you like a question with no answer. And when you stop running from that question, when you allow it to burn slowly in your bones, you begin to walk, not with your feet, but with your attention, with your presence. And each step is not a movement in the world, but a shedding of layers that never belonged to you in the first place. People may see you and think you are alone, but they do not see the constellations inside you. They do not feel the stars being born in the stillness of your surrender. They do not hear the music that plays without sound in the background of your awareness, and that is fine. For the sacred is never noisy, it never screams for recognition, it simply radiates quietly, like the sun that does not announce its rising but lights the whole sky without permission. The further you walk into this sacred space, the more you realize that solitude is not a punishment but a purification. It burns away the inessential. It takes away the masks you did not even know you were wearing. It strips you bare, not out of cruelty but out of immense compassion and because only when you are bare can you finally feel the breeze of life touching your real skin, not the fabricated one made of roles and reputations and recycled beliefs. And in this walking alone, you begin to see how heavily you leaned on things that were never stable, how often you reach for people not to connect but to avoid looking at your own reflection, how often you filled your days with noise not to celebrate but to escape. And in that seeing, of a great sadness may rise, but even this sadness is sacred. Even this grief is not a mistake, but a doorway into something vast and unnamed and beautiful beyond measure. The sacred journey of solitude does not lead you away from the world but brings you into it in a way you never imagined, where every tree begins to speak without language, every breeze feels like a conversation with the cosmos. Every breath becomes a prayer not directed at any deity, but at the very aliveness within you. And this aliveness, this raw, unfiltered sense of being becomes your anchor, your truth. You begin to live not because someone told you how, but because life itself starts to move through you without resistance. And you no longer ask for company to distract you no longer beg for attention to validate you no longer chase experiences to decorate your emptiness. Because you have seen that you are not empty at all. What you thought was a void was actually space, and space is never nothing. It is the womb of all creation. And so the sacred journey continues, not toward a goal, not toward applause or arrival, but deeper and deeper into the mystery that you are, into the silence that is not the absence of sound but the presence of everything, and in that silence there is no end, no beginning, only this breath. This moment, this vast eternal now, there is a kind of silence that is not the absence of sound, but the fullness of presence. Not the muting of words, but the awakening of something deeper beneath them. A silence that does not need to be explained or understood because it is not a concept, but a direct experience, something that envelops you when you are no longer trying to escape yourself, when the mind is tired of its noise and the heart has grown weary of its demands. And in that weariness, a doorway opens, not outwards into the world, but inwards into the vast, uncluttered space within where everything is still yet alive, silent yet speaking, empty yet utterly complete. Most people fear silence because they think it means something is missing, as if words are the proof of connection and noise is the confirmation of life. But silence does not mean absence. It means you are beginning to move beyond surface exchanges into something that cannot be measured or packaged or posted. It means you are entering into communion, not with others first, but with existence itself. And when that communion begins, no amount of spoken wisdom can match the clarity of one silent moment of pure being. Have you ever sat with someone and said nothing? It felt more understood than 1,000 conversations could offer. Have you ever walked into a forest or stood beneath a night sky and felt a vastness that spoke louder than any voice, that held you more tenderly than any words could ever attempt? That kind of silence is not passive, it is powerful, it is not emptiness, it is the overflowing of something too sacred to be uttered. And if you are quiet enough, if you are brave enough to stay present without reaching for distraction, you will hear it speaking, not in language, but in presence. Not in volume, but in truth. The loudest truths of your life will never come to you wrapped in noise. They will arrive when everything else falls away, when the opinions stop, when the arguments dissolve, when the world no longer pulls on your sleeve and you are left with nothing but yourself. And in that moment, if you listen, truly listen, you will hear the quiet voice of clarity, of intuition, of ancient knowing that is always drowned, but was drowned beneath the waves of wanting to be heard, to be liked, to be light, to be somebody. There is a reason why the deepest people you meet often speak the least, because they are not busy throwing words at life, they are receiving it. They are not trying to explain every thought, they are allowing experience to shape them silently. They have discovered that real communication does not begin with the mouth, but with the space between two beings, and when that space is clear and open, silence itself becomes a language more fluent than speech. You cannot hear this silence if you are constantly reacting, constantly filling every gap with stimulation, every pause with commentary, every feeling with judgment, for silence only enters where it is welcomed, only lingers where it is honored, only reveals itself when there is no need to perform. And the moment you stop trying to impress, the moment you stop trying to be clever or spiritual or wise, the moment you simply are, that is when silence becomes not a gap between words, but the fabric that holds everything together. In that silence, you may cry without knowing why, or laugh without reason, or feel a calm that has no origin, because it is not reacting to the outside. It is rising from within. And that is when you realize silence has always been your teacher, your healer, your guide, that it has been walking beside you all along, waiting for you to turn toward it, not as an enemy of life, but as its most honest expression. And so the journey continues, not toward more noise, more opinions, more declarations, but toward deeper listening, quieter presence, softer attention. And as you walk this path, the world may call you silent. You will know the truth, that silence does not mean nothing is happening. Silence means everything is happening, just not in the way the noisy world expects. There is a certain intelligence in pain that no comfort can teach, a sharpness that cuts not to wound you, but to carve away the illusions you wrapped around yourself like armor. And though it arrives uninvited and unwelcome, though it burns and breaks and bends you in ways you never imagined, pain is not here to destroy you. Here, it is here to reveal you, to strip off what is false, to shape what is real, to sculpt the raw stone of your being into something closer to truth. And if you have the courage not to resist it, not to escape or numb or bargain with it, you will find that the pain you once cursed was holding in its hands the very chisel that would free you from your own stone. No one seeks pain willingly, for the ego was built for preservation, for seeking pleasure and avoiding discomfort. And yet the most beautiful things in life are rarely born from ease. They come when something cracks open, when a storm rises, when a loss shatters the floor beneath you, and you fall not into ruin but into revelation. Because what you truly are cannot be broken, only uncovered, and pain, with its fierce hands and relentless presence, knows exactly where to strike. Not to punish but to uncover the sculpture that has always been waiting beneath the surface of what you think you are. You may fight it, you may scream and collapse and curse the sky for its cruelty. And all of that is human, all of that is part of the process. But even in your resistance, pain continues its work. Not asking for permission, not waiting for your approval, simply doing what it came to do, which is to hollow out the noise, to dismantle the identities built from fear, to burn down the illusions of control and replace them with something far more powerful. Surrender, presence, vulnerability, the kind that does not weaken you, but makes you unshakably alive. You see, when life is easy, we become soft in the wrong places and hard in the wrong ways. We grow addicted to comfort, intoxicated by distractions, and forget the depth that life is already offering. But pain refuses to let you sleep through your own becoming. Pain forces you to feel what you've been avoiding, to listen to what you've silenced, to face the truths you've buried, and in doing so, it returns you to the ground of your own being, where the real work of transformation begins. Not from motivation, not from strategy, but from the raw fire of inner dismantling. And yes, it is messy, yes, it is terrifying to be undone, to have no answers, to fall apart without knowing who you'll be on the other side. But if you stay with it, if you let yourself be shattered without rushing to glue yourself back together too quickly, you'll find that pain does not leave you empty, it leaves you clean. It clears the space within you where the false once lived. And in that clearing, something sacred begins to grow, not because you forced it, but because you finally made room for what is real. The greatest works of art are not made from perfect blocks. They are carved, struck, chipped away until the essential form emerges. And just like that, pain will sculpt you, will shape your silence, your solitude, your scars into a kind of beauty the world does not applaud but deeply needs. Because people do not heal from your perfection, they heal from your presence, your depth, your honesty, your ability to stand in your pain and say, and more because of it, not less. And one day when the storm has passed and the fire has cooled and you look in the mirror and see not a shattered being but a fierce, tender, grounded soul, you will not say, I wish it never happened, because you will know that without it, you would still be asleep inside the stone of your former self, untouched, safe, but unseen. And now you are visible, now you are awake, now you are alive in a way only pain could have taught you to be. So walk with your pain, not as a victim but as a student, not with shame, but with reverence. Because pain may not have given you what you wanted, and it has given you something far greater. Oh, truth, more stillness, more love. Not because life became easier, but because you became deeper. There comes a moment in your journey when the applause that once thrilled you begins to sound hollow, when the compliments that once fed your ego no longer nourish your being, when you realize that every time you waited for someone to approve of you, to like you, to recognize your effort, you are unknowingly handing over pieces of your power, scattering fragments of your soul in the hands of those who could never truly hold you. And in that moment, if you are willing to stay with the discomfort instead of running back toward external affirmation, you begin to taste something rare and potent. Not the sweetness of validation, but the stillness of self-knowing. It is not that praise is wrong or appreciation is unnecessary, but when your worth is tied to another's perception, you become like a leaf tossed in the winds of opinion, constantly adjusting, constantly performing, constantly pleasing. And in doing so, you lose your center. You forget that you are not here to fit into expectations but to embody truth. And truth does not shift with popularity. It does not soften to make others comfortable. It simply is quietly radiant, unshaken whether crowned or criticized. You may find at first that the absence of validation feels like emptiness, like rejection, like invisibility. But if you can sit in that space without scrambling to fill it, without rushing to prove your worth again, you will discover that what felt like loneliness was actually spaciousness. What felt like silence was actually freedom, because now you are no longer a product of someone else's gaze, you are no longer performing to be accepted, you are simply present. And presence, unlike approval, does not fluctuate with mood or crowd. There is a deep and liberating strength in knowing who you are when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when no one even knows what you're carrying. And yet you keep going, not because someone is measuring your progress, but because there is a quiet fire within you. A still conviction that does not scream or demand validation but moves steadily, like a river. carving through stone not for attention, but because it is its nature to flow. And once you begin to live from that space, you stop chasing visibility, you stop shrinking for comfort, you stop editing yourself to be palatable, because you realize that freedom is not about being seen by many. It is about being true to yourself even when no one sees, even when no one understands. Because the deepest truths are rarely recognized by the surface mind. And what matters most is not how many eyes are on you, but how aligned you are with the quiet knowing inside you. You start to see that most of the world is caught in a mirror, trying to reflect what others want to see. And the more you release that need, the more clearly you begin to see yourself, not through the lens of performance, but through the clarity of presence. And this clarity becomes your compass. Not swayed by trends or praise, not bent by criticism or comparison, but steady and grounded in something so intimate that it needs no name, no stage, no spotlight to validate. And this is where life begins to deepen, not when you are liked, but when you are real, not when you are understood, but when you are whole, not when you are celebrated, but when you no longer need celebration to know that you are enough, because there is a freedom far greater than fame, far sweeter than approval, far more lasting than reputation. And it is the freedom of no longer needing to be anything other than what you already are. So walk quietly if you must, walk unseen if needed. Speak only when your words rise from truth, not from the hunger to be heard. And let the world forget you if it must, because once you are free from the need to be validated, you are no longer bound by anyone's measure of your worth. And in that vast and holy solitude, you become untouchable. Not because no one can harm you, but because you no longer seek to be held by anything other than your own soul. There comes a time when you stop asking which direction to walk, because you begin to understand that the path is not laid out in front of you like a map drawn by someone wiser, but is born beneath your feet with every conscious step you take. That the questions you kept throwing at the sky begin to dissolve, not because they are answered, but because they no longer hold the same urgency. And you begin to see that you are not here to find a path, as if it is hidden somewhere outside of you, but to become the path itself, to walk in such a way that the ground remembers your presence, the air carries your intention, and the moment itself becomes your teacher, your mirror, your unfolding. Oh. It is not a path made of signs and assurances, not a route marked by milestones and medals, but a movement born from stillness, a rhythm that pulses from the deepest part of your being, not always easy to explain, often difficult to justify to the world, but unmistakably alive, unmistakably yours. And once you feel that pull, not from desire but from inner alignment, you begin to walk not to arrive, not to achieve, but because there is something sacred in the very act of moving with presence, something holy in honoring what calls you, even when it makes no sense to anyone else. To become the path means you stop dividing the sacred from the simple. You stop waiting for the perfect conditions, the perfect mood, the perfect clarity, and you begin to walk through the mess, through the not knowing with a kind of quiet courage that does not need to be seen or celebrated, because it is not sourced in ego, it is born from something far beneath that, from a still chord that doesn't shout for attention but simply moves, breath by breath, not for the world but for the truth of it. And as you walk, you will be tempted to look around, to compare your pace, to question your direction, but if you are becoming the path, then you must understand that no one else can walk it for you, no one else can trace your terrain. And trying to follow someone else's footsteps will only lead you away from your own becoming, because the path you are here to become is not meant to look like anyone else's, it is not meant to impress or convince or conform, it is meant to be lived fully, honestly, relentlessly. Sometimes it will feel like you are going in circles, like nothing is changing, like no progress is being made. But when you are becoming the path, progress is not measured by distance or speed. It is measured by depth, by presence, by the way your awareness expands with each step you take, by how fully you can be here without fleeing into fantasy or memory. Deeply you can surrender without collapsing into passivity, because this kind of walking is not movement for escape, it is movement. And slowly, the old ideas of success begin to fade, the need to arrive somewhere becomes less important than the quality of each step. And you begin to notice how even the smallest actions, when done with full presence, begin to reshape your very being, how the breath, once overlooked, becomes a mantra, how the silence, once feared, becomes your guide, and this way you are not just moving through life, you are allowing life to move through you. not as a separate event, but as a sacred integration where what you walk becomes who you are. And when others look to you for direction, for answers, for a path to follow, you will not hand them a doctrine or a formula, because you will know the truth that no one can walk for another, that each soul must become its own trail, and instead of giving them steps, you will give them presence. Instead of instructions, you will give them your stillness. And by becoming your own path, you will silently remind them that they too must trust the quiet voice within, the trembling courage to take one more step into the unknown, and trust that the path will appear, not because it is shown, but because it is lived. So keep walking, not to reach, not to prove, not to arrive, but to become the way, become the truth, become the space through which the mystery flows. And as you do, you realize that the path was never separate from you. It was waiting within you all along, waiting for you not to find it, but to become it.